Oh dear. Okay, I apologize, but we're actually this is part two. I'm only doing this for upload and storage reasons, not because I couldn't do this in one take. This is literally immediately after the previous one. I apologize, but here we are. Welcome back. Maybe this is more digestible if you feel like you've read a chapter. I don't know. I don't know how to tell stories. And apparently, Neverland, who made Estpolis, Lufia 1 and 2, they had problems telling their story as well. The very first actual prototype or beta for any Lufia game was on the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. And they decided, this is around the time it was very prevalent to develop games that were very cheap on like the freaking PC 98, when that became really cheap. And so I think that was their initial design decision, and games of that nature typically translated over to the Mega Drive much better than any other console at the time, especially when you're on a budget. But they drew up the story and all the concepts for Estpolis, which, when the first game came out over here in America, was called Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. And there was later a second game called Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. Chronologically, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom occurs 100 years after Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. Why was the game released in two halves, and why were they 100 years apart from each other? Well, they were, at the time, my understanding is, the programmers who were part of the design process were mostly used to being on PC games, where you're not really limited by space, because if the game starts getting too big, it's like, okay, this game has a boot disk and a data disk, and then, okay, maybe it has 3 data disks, okay, maybe it's got 5 data disks, and then you could have a blank disk, which is usually like your user, character, password, save file type thing for the PC-88, because it had 2 disk drives at a time. But, it's kind of like the PlayStation. What eventually became the PlayStation is Final Fantasy VII was 3 discs, Final Fantasy VIII and IX were 4 discs. Games like Fear Effect were also 4 discs long. Eventually storage across multimedia wasn't necessarily a problem. But in this particular era, when only 16-bit physical chip-based and cartridge systems were available to widespread consumers, 16-bit cartridges could really, again, only hold 16 megs of data at most. Sometimes you get them up to 24. Sometimes with special things like the voice compression things for Star Ocean and Tales of Fantasia, you could do some pretty crazy things. Like, those things are really huge, but they have these special physical chips in every single cart to be able to decompress audio from a storage on every single cart, which is expensive. And Neverland Soft wasn't necessarily in, the habit of contracting out special chips to go into their cartridges to make their games. So by the time they actually realized, oh, hey, when we start making this game, it's like, okay, we want to start with like the ending first, and then we'll work our way backwards, which is something I can respect and appreciate. Because Mr. Insano Man over at Kavia, dude who did like Drakengard, did Nier games, he writes everything backwards. He writes the ending first, and then he writes like a couple anchor points, and then he fills in the blanks. I've always done the same thing when I'm actually like writing books and novels. That's actually how I do things as well, which I thought was interesting to learn, that we do things the same way when we're like in the creation process. And so Estpolis had its second half done first, which ended up becoming Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, or Estpolis, which would later eventually, I believe, become known as Estpolis Part 1, even though it chronologically comes afterwards, but whatever. It's weird, right? So they had to split the game into 2 entire different halves, and I'm really going to try and tell this story from my personal perspective and the way I played through them myself. This is back in the day when Blockbuster Video was notorious for being like the place to rent everything. But I also learned that mom and pop video stores would have different things than Blockbuster had. So there's a lot of interesting games that I learned about from that. And for the first time in Grand Terrace, back when I lived there was a Hollywood Video that had just started opening in Southern California. This was when Hollywood Video was a new thing where I lived, because competing against Blockbuster was pretty hard to do in Southern California at the time. And going through Hollywood Videos, where I found all kinds of amazing games for the very first time. But the very first game I ever rented from Hollywood Video was Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. And I distinctly remember at the time, talking about storytelling and all that, my mother was very adamant about teaching me to learn how to type on a QWERTY keyboard, because that's what we use in America. I wish I learned Dvorak. That's the superior keyboard. QWERTY is inferior. But my keyboard of choice is American QWERTY. If you don't know, that's the first letters across the top left of the keyboard, QWERTY. Dvorak is the first 6 letters across the center row where your fingers default to, because those letters are used way more frequently in modern English than they were back in the day. So the Dvorak is a better keyboard now. I am a typing nerd. I collect typewriters. I just love storytelling, and I have a very clear recollection of typing on an Apple IIc computer on a black and white screen, literally a black screen with white characters that appeared on a mechanical clickety-clackety keyboard. And the monitor was like, it was a CRT monitor, so it slightly diffused the white into these hues of red, green, and blue in different angles, depending on how you looked at it. I loved that computer. It was the first time I ever wrote anything about video games, actually, was on that computer. And the very first thing I ever wrote about was Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, for like a little school journal thing where I had to write something during a summer break. So I wrote on that computer about playing through Lufia and the Fortress of Doom while I rented it week after week after week from Hollywood Video. But I only ever got about halfway through the game, because it's pretty hard old school RPG. It's very vanilla. There's nothing special about it. You just have to level grind a lot. Like mechanically, there's really nothing special about it at all. It's seriously just a tub of vanilla ice cream. But the story is just this decadent creme brulee and like, ruby chocolate covered black truffle. You know what I'm saying? Like the story, even though the gameplay is literally mid, the story is so good that you just like, I will level grind for 2 hours to find out what happens next. About midway through the game, Lufia, this little blue-haired magical girl that is a friend of the red-haired protagonist, she gets kidnapped. And I really didn't understand the context of it, because honestly, this game doesn't use stupid baby language, and I was a stupid baby at the time. RPGs actually taught me how to expand my vocabulary. Eventually, when I was playing RPGs, I would literally sit there with a dictionary, and if I didn't know what that word meant, I'd sit there flipping pages until I'm like, okay, what does that word mean? Okay. And like, RPGs helped me develop a love for words, writing, storytelling, everything, honestly. But I will admit, the first time I played through Lufia 1, I didn't understand the context of what was happening. I didn't really understand any of it. Even though something about it was captivating me, I didn't fully grasp it. There were adult concepts beyond my comprehension and my life experiences up until that time. So, years and years go by, and it's 1996. In the very same Hollywood Video, one day I see right next to Lufia 1, which I had been considering renting again for the last month or so, but I was starting to pick up other Sega Genesis games at the time, because we didn't get a Genesis until like 1994, and there was tons of Genesis games that I had never played. So it was like, oh, I can rent the Genesis games now from the thing when mom and dad go get a movie. But one day I see Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals, right next to Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. And I'm like, oh, hey, I remember playing this and really liking the story in this. I wonder what the sequel's like. The sequel was like this girl who you used to know in 5th grade, and then you see her again in high school, if you know what I'm talking about, guys. And it's like, she ain't the little nerdy girl with glasses that I remember. What happened? Ooh, something different about her. Yeah, a lot is different about Lufia too. It has gameplay mechanics oozing, just non-stop out of every pore every second you play it. But again, story-wise, what really captivated me is that when this game starts, you are given a very interesting, like, intro anime cutscene, kind of. I mean, like, it really feels like the first episode of an anime where there's not an OP. It's just like the anime starts, and it's just like created by this dude, produced by this guy, music by this guy, and it's like letterboxed even. If for Super Nintendo, okay, this is interesting. And you see this yellow light going back into this castle of darkness and shadows in a world of lightless abyss. And then a green light goes there, and then a blue light goes there, and then the green, yellow, and blue light, all three of them disperse from the castle at the same time. And then a red light goes to the castle by itself. And then the perspective goes into the top of this castle, to the peak, to the throne room where the Dark Lord Auric sits unmovingly, eternally. He doesn't need to move. He doesn't need to do anything. He has created the Sinistrals, all 4 of them. Daos, the Sinistral of Terror. Gades, the Sinistral of Destruction. Ammon, the Sinistral of Chaos. And before him currently is the blue-haired Aram, the Sinistral of Death. Between the credit roll, Eric says, Aram, who should rule? We Sinistrals or the humans? Aram says, why, we Sinistrals, of course. Eric says, don't BS me. I didn't say, tell me what I want to hear, or what you think I want to hear. I asked you, Aram, individually. I did not ask you alongside your 3 brothers. But I asked you uniquely, who should rule? We Sinistrals, who are eternal, or the humans, whose lives are so fleeting they can barely go beyond 100 years? Aram says to the effect of, I don't know. I've never thought about that before. Very similar to Valkyrie profile, but with this little bit of a lemon twist to it. In this case, it is Eric, the dark god, who has created the Sinistrals to act on his behalf. He is now asking his own, similarly eternal creation, if it was right for them to be created, or should we just let the humans rule? Aram has no clue, and so she decides, if I don't know, I'm going to go find out. And so she sets off in her red ball of light, and then the title goes as the red ball of light travels the world and then ends between 3 triangular islands in the center of the world, each with a massive turret tower built upon each, separated by barrier reefs with a vast abyss between the 3. and the title card appears. Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals, with such brilliant musical timing that you can tell before you even press start, before you even see new game or enter a name, you can tell the people who made this game were very deeply invested in presenting a story to you to the best of their abilities. So you hit start. I love the select your data music. I love most music in this game, but quite frankly, this is one of the few rare games where I did not smash it into my Super Nintendo, furiously hit the start button to begin the game as quick as possible. I would sometimes sit there for 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes, who knows? I'll eat a couple Cheetos and drink a little bit of Gatorade before I start. And just listen to the music on the start a new game, load your data. That screen, I would just sit there and listen to that music because it was so good. Also, my life was chaotic, and that very tranquil theme helped soothe a lot of very angsty, seething parts of my life. It was good. But when you first start the game, man, Maxim, Maxim, his default name, Maxim. I mean, can you have a cooler hero name? Maybe. Ark from Terra Enigma has a pretty dope name, but Maxim. My name is the epitome of all things. I am the peak. What a dope name, Maxim. He comes into his hometown of El Cid. He sees his childhood friend with blue hair, seen this before. Tia, she runs the item shop in El Cid. And Maxim is like, hey, honey, I just killed 6 jellies. I killed a bunch of freaking monsters with my sword. Isn't that cool? And Tia's like, that's cool, honey. Why don't you wash up and come have dinner? Because Tia wants to rope Maxim into being like a fancy husband with a white picket fence and a little dog type husband, and that's all she cares about. And you know, they have that phantom fish dinner, which honestly is a wonderful scene. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Play the game. This is the beginning. If that doesn't tell you that this game is going to do interesting things with its narrative, then you know, whatever. It's also when you first see that characters don't always say things. Sometimes they just think them. That's one of the reasons I love this game so much, is that you understand what every character is both saying and thinking. You understand what everyone is feeling and how they're actually reacting to situations. And as a very introverted child, it was very useful for me to, you know, see that, yeah, other people do think about their actions, and maybe sometimes they don't actually always say what they're thinking. And yeah, the swamp cooler just shut off. It's hot out here in California. What can I say? It's hot here in the tent too. It's late at night, but it's still 94. Anyway, this is what drew me in, is that off the bat, it's like, this is not just like, oh, I'm totally gonna marry my childhood anime girlfriend with a bunch of, you know, hilarious sexual tension along the way on this JRPG journey. No, off the bat, it is basically like, this is a thin ice, tenuous relationship that is probably on the verge of splitting apart. This is before you fight the first battle in the game. They kind of are putting this as much in your face as possible. This is a story not about characters. This is a story about human beings. A very important and prevalent theme. Otherwise, there'd be no purpose to the entire story. Maxim goes on his hero's journey as you know, you go through the tutorial dungeon, which frankly is probably one of the coolest tutorials in video game history, because it lets you know that this is not just some top-down, tile-based, turn-based RPG. There's block puzzles. There's cut the grass and find the hidden switches. Cut the ivy on the walls to find hidden pathways to get super cool treasure chests with really bomb-ass equipment in them. Also, in dungeons, there's no random encounters. One of, in my opinion, the greatest design decisions in RPG history is that the world map does have random encounters as you go from one town to another, but in dungeons, encounters function more like a roguelike. When you move, everything else gets a turn as well. Except you have a bow and arrow with unlimited ammo. You don't have to pay for it or anything. If you hit an enemy's tile with a bow and arrow, they're stunned and paralyzed and can't move for 6 turns. This gives you an opportunity to sneak up behind them, and if the front of your sprite is facing their backside when they unparalyze, you get a preemptive strike. This opens up a whole avenue of gameplay possibilities with the fact that not only do you not always have to level grind for the fact that if you just want to get through this dungeon, you can take your time setting up each encounter to always get a preemptive strike, or the fact is you can also level grind by always getting preemptives, not having to use your potions or your MP as a resource. You can just chew on the mobs. It feels freaking good. It just feels good, man. But as you finish your first actual dungeon, you beat the boss troll or whatever. It's eventually just becomes a regular enemy, but at that point it's a boss, that type of enemy, which I love, by the way, when what was once a boss early in the game becomes a regular enemy with the same stats, and there has to be like 4 of them and you still mow them down. You actually get this feeling of like, I am so much more powerful than I was when I started playing. Wow, that's awesome. But when you first fight, the troll boss or whatever who has stolen a key that blocks commerce between 2 towns, and why would the monsters interfere with humans? They haven't done that for like 100 years. It doesn't benefit them to go out of their way of their daily lives to interfere with humans, and we don't interfere with them, and all humans and monsters have been super chill for 100 years, and now they're not anymore. That's weird, right? And then Iris shows up. This is a point multiple times throughout this video I'm actually going to suggest to you that you go look up parts of the OST for this game. And the first one I want you to look up is Iris's theme, also sometimes called the Prophet. What I love about Iris's first appearance is something a lot of JRPGs did not do at the time, is that as she walks out of the stair icon tile on the map, she makes a footstep sound. She feels like she is also a character walking around the same as you. Something that is critically important to the narrative, frankly. Iris, the Prophet. Green hair, red dress. She shows up and is just like, hey, explain something to me, sir. There's so many of you, humans, right? Why is it that you're the only one who did something about this? Maxim basically says to the effect of, I don't know, because I felt like it. What is it to you? Who are you? Why are you asking me that? It just felt like the right thing to do, so I did it. She takes a special interest in him and tells him, well, if you think helping your fellow man out is so important, there's another town to the north of here that you could probably help out too. Maybe you should use that key. Go see what their problem is too. See ya. Literally, I will see you later. Now, this is a fun part of the game because you go to the next town and they're having problems with earthquakes. And this is one of the parts of the game where the Japanese origin and programmers are obviously coming into play. Because what is causing the earthquakes is a Namazu, a giant catfish who is bored and or wants to go to sleep. And according to ancient Japanese mythology and lore, the Namazu, look it up, seriously, go on Wikipedia, look up the Namazu. It is a giant catfish that smashes its head against the entire island of Japan, causing earthquakes, to either make itself go to sleep or because it's bored. It's just a petulant little punk ass giant catfish. So you go fight the giant catfish, and this is the first time I'm going to tell you right now. If for some reason you do play this game, play it on an emulator and save state every major boss, because they all have like a 1 in 256 chance of dropping a rock. I will get into rocks later, but believe me when I say most major bosses will drop a rock, very rarely, and you can save state it. Get them to like 100 or 50 HP left or whatever, make a save state, make everyone defend, try to defeat them. Didn't get the rock, reload your save, make 2 people defend, make 1 person use a potion, make 1 person attack. Did you get the rock? Just keep doing that. Every single individual action you make in battle influences the RNG, and it can influence whether or not you get the rock. Just save state and save scum manipulate until you get every rock from every boss. You will have a much more fun time playing this game if you do, I promise. The catfish can drop the catfish jewel, the first rock you can actually get in the game. It's super OP, and I'll get into why later when I start talking about IP attacks. I will, believe me. Strap in. But after you finish the catfish cave, this is the first time that the game introduces to you that, by the way, make sure you solve every puzzle in the dungeon. Because at this point, you're kind of hinted at that, by the way, there's a girl with blue hair. We saw her going into the catfish cave. The hardest and most obscure puzzle in the catfish cave requires you to defeat 3 enemies in a specific order based on some cryptic bullcrap. And if you do that, a door will open and you'll get access to the Bug Crusher, a weapon that you'll probably want to hold on to for a little while because its IP attack actually hits every enemy on the battlefield at once for 1.2x damage. Again, I'll get into IP attacks later, but the Bug Crusher is pretty savage. But it's in that puzzle room that, just to kind of reinforce, like, make sure you solve every puzzle in a dungeon, that Tia is standing there, and Maxim runs up to her and is like, Tia, why are you following me around? I mean, I'm sorry I kind of dipped out on you. I realized that was probably not the best thing to do to my childhood friend, and I apologize for that, but, like, you can't be following me around into these monster-infested dungeons. Like, you're going to get hurt. And Tia's like, oh, I know how to use magic. I can cast curative magic, and I know how to cast fireball magic. Like, you don't know me. I'm strong. I'm an independent woman. And then she tries to run off on her own, and then she gets attacked by a goblin, and Maxim has to run after her, and then he saves her. And then she's just like, okay, maybe I'm a little hot-headed, but you did kind of just run off on me without, like, saying anything, and we've known each other since we were little kids, so, sorry about that. And it's just like, this is another one of those moments where it's like, dude, this is not just an ooh-woo anime love story at all. This is like there's relationship problems, and they're like talking it out, and like while they're surrounded by all this like goblin and monster gore and blood all over the walls, they're just like having a heart-to-heart conversation, and it's like, yo, this is next level. I have not played anything like this before. And so eventually you make your way to Tanbell. While you're there, you run into Guy, who I recognized when I got there, and at that point something started to click in my head. I remembered playing through Lufia 1, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, because that game was really weird. When you start that game, you start with a party of people named Maxim, Guy, Salon, and Artie. And you fight the 4 Sinistrals, and then it's just kind of like, 100 years later, and then you play Lufia 1, and I started to remember, like, maybe I should rent Lufia 1 again and play through that again, because I can tell there's something I'm obviously going to miss about this. I rented Lufia 1, and I got far enough in to see in Lufia 1, a game that was made like 4 years prior, they even mentioned Guy in the script. He's an actual character in the game. In fact, he dies. He's like over 105 years old, and he meets Maxim's descendant 100 years later and like passes on a legacy to him and all this other stuff. And it's like, this was the point I realized playing through these games. It's like, dude, this really was just one giant story originally. Like, Lufia 2 wasn't really a prequel. It wasn't an afterthought where they decided we can expand on the universe more from the point of our initial entry into this world. This is when I realized, like, dude, they really did intend this all to be one single homogenous story originally. It just got broken up into segments. But you meet Guy. Guy meets Maxim, and they have this moment like Dragon Ball Z characters have sometimes. With, Guy is Goku, and he can see that Maxim is super powerful. He's like, I can tell by the way you have that sword mounted on your belt that you're ready to draw it at any time. You seem like a capable weapon swinger, bro. Let's go swing our swords. Swords against each other in this back alley. So Maxim and Guy have a little duel, and it's just like a mutual man love for each other because they know how to swing swords. And Tia, you can see her thinking to herself, because this game has thought bubbles, not just dialogue. That's why I love it. Tia is just kind of thinking to herself like, ugh, I don't like this guy. He's just encouraging Maxim to go on his little swordsman journey, and I don't want him to. And while they're having this little duel, Guy's girlfriend gets kidnapped, and you go to Tanbell Tower and you save his girlfriend, and Hilda is just like, oh, Guy, you're so cool. I love how strong and tough you are, baby. And Guy's like, honey, these two are going on a magical journey to go defeat the forces of evil, and I just feel like I gotta help them, honey. And Hilda's like, babe, I love you so freaking much. It makes me so hot when you say things like that. I will wait as long as I need to. Go fight with the forces of evil. You are so tough and beautiful, honey. I love the way you swing your sword. And Maxim then thinks to himself, I wish Tia was like that. You continue your journey. You eventually meet the king, who tells you to go to the Treasure Sword Shrine, which is when you learn the mercy of the game developers. Now you have, around this time, you encounter Salon, another new party member. And as soon as you enter the Parcelite Kingdom, and you go inside the castle gates of the Parcelite Castle, Maxim sees Salon, the warrior, mage, swordsman, magician girl, does everything, can do all, pretty much best character in the game statistically and equipment wise. Just imagine a red mage who can wield great swords and plate mail, and also HQ elemental staves, and has an S rank in every single spell casting capability. I'm going to start making a lot of Final Fantasy XI references soon, by the way, and you'll understand why. Around the time that Maxim realizes that, oh man, I love this swordsmanship chick. Look at the way she just parried this entire royal guard away and made them eat dirt, and then told them how to better their defenses against her. Oh man, she's all about swordsmanship, and she knows how to cast magic better than me. And, as a guy myself, I can very easily put myself in Maxim's shoes and think to myself, we would make great babies together. Maxim most certainly thinks the same thing, as evidenced by Tia's woman's intuition going off in her thought bubble of, I'm in trouble, aren't I? as I mentioned, the mercy of the developers. As you're going toward the Treasure Sword Shrine, as directed by Salon's King, because why not? This is when you can first encounter the red cores, the game's equivalent of metal slimes. You will always encounter like 4 to 6 of them at a time, and while they do run away quite frequently, they don't run away all the time, and they don't require critical hits to defeat either. They only have so much health, and they go down pretty easily. Around the time that regular battles are maybe giving you around 1400 EXP, these are giving you around 22,000 per red core. It's a lot of EXP. You'll be holding down the cancel button and going through the level up sound about 15 times per encounter for a little while. The game understands that, hey, we just threw 2 new party members on you. We don't know what level you actually want to be. Maybe you can course correct that a little bit here. Again, this game is designed by people who really wanted you to experience the story and not get into roadblocks. So throughout play testing, this is something I know, they kind of figured out like where are the boss points that people really had problems with. And usually anytime you may encounter a boss that you can have a problem with, guarantee you walk around outside of that dungeon, there's some type of red, blue, green core, something there to help you level grind really quickly and just go through the dungeon and be done with it. Beautiful game design. Now, I'm about to nerd out, because that's what all these videos are about. This is what I've been waiting for. Y'all know Final Fantasy VII. Y'all know the Pokemons. Do you know that Lufia 2 was both of those things before either of them? Ho 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 ho. And more. You see, this game has something called capsule monsters in it. And you'll probably have about 2 of them, maybe 3 around this point if you've explored the world map thoroughly and all the dungeons. Capsule monsters are Pokemon, except instead of getting EXP through battle, you just feed them your old unused equipment that you don't need anymore. Rather than your old equipment just being, oh, well, when I get to the next town, I'll unequip my character, sell my old stat sticks, and buy new stat sticks that are better. That's not how this game operates. And you'll end up encountering situations where maybe I don't want to actually get rid of my old equipment. Maybe I don't want to, even though it'll give a really big boost to the evolution bar by feeding equipment to the capsule monster. Equipment is not just stat sticks in this game. What's awesome is that there are 2 types of equipment. There are stat sticks that are just raw statistical boosts. But then there's equipment that has IP abilities on them. Those are always statistically inferior. But the other side of that is that by leaving that piece of equipment on, you have access to the IP ability that it gives you. If you're familiar with Final Fantasy VII Retail, you know like the body armor for mages that gives you impact? It's like that, basically, except it doesn't use your MP. It uses your IP, your Ikari points. Ikari is Japanese for anger or rage, basically. A character generates IP based on the damage they take in battle, not the damage they deal, but specifically damage they incur. And it's based on your guts stat. Remember I mentioned those rocks earlier? Maybe you can boost your gut stat pretty good with some of those rocks. And maybe you want to boost the gut stat of characters who can equip really strong damaging IP abilities. Remember I mentioned Final Fantasy XI? This is why I love this game so much. By the time you're at this point, maybe like a third of the way through the game at the Treasure Sword Shrine, you're going to start having access to so much secondary, tertiary, ancillary equipment options through your weapon, your shield, your helmet, your body armor, your accessory, and your rock slash jewel slash stone, which has absolutely no gear, job locks, or anything like that. Any character can equip any gem or stone or jewel. But you really want to make sure you're giving guts boosts to your frontline fighters, because they're the ones that are going to have your IP abilities on weapons that, for example, deal 4x damage and add an element to it, which is how you're going to be able to slay bosses with extreme efficiency. Also, there's things like accessories that give attack up. So it's like, okay, check this out. I can have my spellcaster cast the attack up spell on my bruiser, but one of my DPS also has the ability to use an attack up ability through their IP, through their accessory. So I can double stack an attack up on my bruiser and make them then do a 4x elemental attack after I've double attack buffed them. There's actual genuine strategy that you can apply to the combat in Lufia 2 that, in my opinion, was literally over 10 years ahead of its time. And that's just the IP system. I wanted to mention that because you don't always want to, like, maybe I don't want to give up the Insect Crush, even though it'll give me like 8 evolution points on this bar, because the Insect Crush is something that I can equip the farm enemies with, because its IP attack is a 1.2x damage on all enemies. You always don't know. Do I want to hold on to this old piece of equipment? Do I want to feed it to my capsule monster to evolve it so it's stronger, learns new abilities, and goes into crazy new stat up capabilities? And there's all kinds of different capsule monsters. You have Fumi, your neutral, normal elemental one. There's the fire dog that eventually turns into a dragon that has a master form that turns into a phoenix. There's the little radish dude thing that turns into a Moai head and then becomes Titan himself, which has unlimited HP and defense and can soak up tons of hits in battle. And the Earth one's really good, honestly, because capsule monsters always have full HP and are auto-revived at the start of every battle. So they're really good at just soaking up extra hits, and it's beneficial no matter which capsule monster you want. Pick one and level it up, because it just soaks up so much extra hits. It saves on so much potions that you don't need to use, ethers you don't need to spend, mana you don't need to expend healing your party, because your capsule monster is soaking up so many extra hits and barfing out fireballs and one-shotting enemies for you so you don't have to deal with them. Capsule monsters, literally just Pokemon before Pokemon existed, are one of my favorite gameplay mechanics in any JRPG ever. I absolutely love the capsule monsters in Lufia 2. Now, around this time, you realize this game's a little bit like Final Fantasy IV. Your party swaps in and out depending on the story flags you've triggered. And I believe it's around this time that Guy gets called back to Tanbell because Hilda has fallen ill. And that's the pivotal moment where Guy realizes, like, yo, guys, look, I've actually really enjoyed our magical anime swordsman adventure, going to fight evil and all that. But the woman I love is sick right now, and I'm going to go make her chicken soup. I'll catch up with you later. Peace out. Guy's pretty awesome, quite frankly. Guy occupies your bruiser slot in your typical turn-based JRPG. He doesn't have any magic capabilities, but he existed just to beat the crap out of things and smash IP abilities into things, so it sucks to lose him. But then he gets replaced by Dakar. Arguably, in my opinion, one of the greatest characters ever. I don't just mean one of the best characters in a JRPG. I don't just mean one of the best characters in a video game. I am comparing Dakar up against the likes of Harry Dresden and Sherlock Holmes from actual literature, as Dakar is one of the best characters in anything that anyone will ever create, ever. Because he is a transcendental idiot. I'm not just saying that. IQ and intelligence, is an actual stat in this game. Most characters have an IQ that hovers around 100, 120, somewhere between there. It's at base value before you use equipment to modify it. It's meant to be a character's IQ. Dakar has an IQ of 14. He is an idiot. But he also has the biggest heart of gold of any such archetypical character. When you first meet Dakar, you go into his kingdom, and it's kind of like when you first meet Salon. Except there's suddenly like 15 enemies surrounding Dakar, and this guy called Indra shows up. He's a monster master. And I control all the monsters that have gone crazy because I have the psychic influence over them. Watch me destroy you, feeble human. And Dakar is like, oh, dude, sweet. Dude, I've never been able to get this many monsters around me before. I usually kill all of them before there's this many around me. I've always wanted to try the Dakar Buster out. Watch this. And he just marks the absolute dog crap out of all of them in 1 second. And this dude's, I brought all my strongest evil monsters. I'm going to take over this castle. Dakar just basically farts and is like, okay, sweet. I'm really glad that actually worked. I didn't know if that was actually even going to work. I was just thinking about it for a little while. Oh, hey, can I kick your butt too? You're still around. Get the hell out of my castle. And then the prince shows up. He's just a generic prince sprite. He's not even a real character. He shows up with his little squire escort. And even though Dakar has basically just destroyed like a Hitler Nazi army single-handedly in a single stroke of his axe, there's one tiny little level 1 slime left over. And the prince comes out and is like, aha! There is a monster attacking the kingdom. Come, we must defeat them. It's like a little Don Quixote reference, basically. He kills the slime, and he comes up to Dakar, and he's just like, aha, Sir Dakar, did you see my valiance? Yes. You could learn a thing or two from me, Sir Dakar. And Dakar is just like, you are most correct, Your Highness. I will do better in the future. He is so... He doesn't be like, by the way, you little baby, I just saved your kingdom and you didn't even know. He's just like, absolutely, Your Highness. I agree. I will do better to serve you, and I apologize for shaming you. I love the car. He's just the best, dude. And then the prince goes to try and save the kingdom because he's all full of himself. And you go to save him, and Dakar joins you along the way. And right before the boss room, after you have gone through all these puzzles with your bow and arrow, your Legends of Zelda hook shot, going through dungeons, solving all these cool puzzles. This game is so full of puzzles. I love how many puzzles are in this game. Sometimes Mensa level puzzles even. Some of them are really hard and you may not solve them. You don't have to. There's optional equipment behind them. But right before the boss room, there is the most simple puzzle in the game. It's a small hallway with 2 doors. There's a switch in front of each door. You push the pillar on top of the switch, and it opens the door in front of it. That's it. Okay. Push the pillar on the switch, and you go fight the boss, and Dakar joins you for the boss fight, and then he's like, I'm going to escort the prince back. You guys are pretty cool. I like you guys. Peace out. And then everyone's like, wow, I literally cannot believe how strong Dakar is. Remember I mentioned he has no IQ? Everyone else at this point around the game maybe has about 100, 150 strength. Dakar's got like 400. Dakar smashes. And everyone's just like, wow, what an incredible warrior. I can't believe how strong he is. and it's playing this triumphant music. It's like, yeah, this guy's amazing. Really hope he joins our party. We just kicked the crap out of evil again. Yeah, good guys. And the music stops completely dead. Dakar walks back in the room and he's like, um, how do I open the door in the hallway? And Maxim, in-game text, literally tells him, push the pillar on top of the switch and it opens the door in front of it. That's how you got in here. And Dakar's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. All right, thanks, man. I'll see you back at the castle. Dakar is an absolute freaking idiot. And I absolutely love him for that. Because throughout the narrative, you realize that maybe a lack of intelligence isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of people go throughout their life judging people based on their IQ rather than the quality of their character, which should be a predominant thing they should judge them on. Little side tangential story, because I was into video games, anime, manga, all that stuff in high school. I was obviously part of the loser outcast crowd all the time. And in junior high and high school, that also meant that the kids with like learning disabilities, or sometimes kids who were like actually retarded, sometimes kids who just had like really severe speech impediments or things like that, everyone else who was outcast for whatever reason, we hung out with them as a group. And I guess maybe that's why I have that opinion of things, is that don't judge people by their intelligence or their knowledge or anything like that. The only thing you should ever judge, if you're going to judge another person on, isn't even their actions, but it is the quality and the integrity of their character. And Dakar, as I have seen with the many kids that I went to school with who, had a low IQ, I feel like I had more quality human interactions with them than any of the smart kids who wanted me to hang out with them, quite frankly. A bunch of elitist pricks. I didn't care for that. And I guess to me, Dakar kind of embodied, those types of kids that I went to school with, and just, what is a person's desires, You have to look into a person to see that, but I felt like Dakar was just a simple embodiment of what a lot of those kids wanted to be, like, I think, excuse my language, but I think for a lot of us, what's the term for it? Neurotypical people. Even though I'm not necessarily neurotypical, apparently I'm like 1% autistic or something, according to a bunch of tests that I've taken. I do have ADHD, which does not surprise me, but majority I've become neurotypical from a necessity to interact with people and blend in. It kind of became less of a facade and more of who I actually am over time. And believe me, there's a reason I'm explaining all this. But anyway, yeah, that's the reason I like Dakar as a character so much, because like, I think for like neurotypical people, when they look at like superhero movies, like Iron Man, Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, things like that, and maybe we think to ourselves like, yeah, it'd be cool to be like that. We are thinking that from a perspective of, frankly, in contrast to some people who are actually severely handicapped by their mental challenges in life. The concept of being a superhero means a lot more to them than it does to us. And to me, I don't know, I just always thought that the car was just the coolest kind of, like, it's okay to not be ultra intelligent. It's okay to not know everything. It's okay to just be who you are as long as you have a good heart. To me, that's the kind of character that Dakar is. Or Decker, whatever you want to call him. I say Dakar. But Dakar's not in your party for all that long, and the game makes that pretty obvious to you when, in the last dungeon that he's going to be in your party, you get the Dakar Blade, a weapon that raises his attack in a time when everyone else is barely scraping 200, attack at a time. Dakar's got like 800. He almost has max attack when he equips the legendary Dakar Blade. You get to the end of the dungeon, bad things happen, and Dakar chooses to sacrifice himself so that everyone else can get away safely. And it's like, no. He was the best character in terms of narrative and stats, and you took him away. No, wait, you didn't take him away, did you? He chose to do that because he thought that that was the right thing to do. To the end, Dakar stayed true to himself, and he never let anything influence what he thought was the right thing to do. He never let his strength give him an ego either. That hit me pretty hard, honestly. It wasn't just a story thing. It was the whole package. Anyone who I ever have known who's played Lufia 2 has the same feeling of like, dude, the way the car went out, bro. Dude. Just, dude. You continue on your journey one man short. End up in the tower of whatchamacallit. I'm a little drunk right now. Guy rejoins you and you fight against Gades for the second time. I skipped over a few things. Sorry, I'm not trying to talk for 3 hours. This is already going to be long enough. Fun little side thing. It's actually possible to defeat Gades. This is why I didn't mention it earlier, because it has to do with IP attacks. The first time you fight Gades, the Sinistral of Destruction, you can actually beat him, even though story-wise you're intended to lose. You can't save state this one. You have to have all the right equipment with all the right IP abilities, cast all the right magic on all the right turns, but you can defeat Gades the first time you encounter him, which is pretty cool, because you can get the Gades Blade, which has an IP ability to attack 8 times. It's literally a Kraken Club. Again, the Final Fantasy XI references continue. But it's at that halfway point in the game when you go to the tower that Gades, for the second time you encounter him, he's almost becoming like Team Rocket at this point. He's trying to use an ancient weapon embedded in this tower to basically destroy an entire continent. He has, in fact, walked through and destroyed 2 entire towns so far, which you can see they're flaming rubble on the world map as you pass by them. One of them you can encounter Iris in, who tells you, Iris, the prophet. She's the one who always tells you where to go. She's always directing Maximum where to go next and where he needs to go and who he needs to talk to continue his journey. She's the prophet. She is always there to guide him at the critical moment. When you get to the tower where the weapon of mass destruction lies, Maxim basically ends up throwing himself between the Eldritch circuitry and nearly dies trying to stop it from being activated. And he's the only one there. He's completely by himself. He's been cut off from the rest of the party. And as he starts keeling over and he's about to die, Iris shows up without saying anything and uses the escape magic and teleports him back to this town of Parcelite. It's there that Guy, Tia, and Salon find Maxim's near corpse in the town square. Tia is paralyzed with fear and can't move at seeing the one she loves covered with blood, choking to death and nearly dying on the ground. But Salon runs over to him and tries to help him. And that is the moment where Tia finally realizes, I don't love Maxim, do I? I love the idea of what I can turn Maxim into, but I don't love him for who he is. But she does. That is the point at which Tia leaves the party permanently. She never comes back. Maxim and Salon get married and they go through 4 seasons together, and at the end of it all they have a child together. Grandma's taking care of the baby. Maxim and Salon are just defeating monsters on the outskirts of town, keeping the kingdom of Parcelite safe from whatever errant monsters may show up. Life is good, and Maxim starts to think, maybe I did just want that white picket fence life after all. I just didn't find the right woman yet that I was supposed to do that with. That all gets cut short when Indra, the one who attacked Dakar's kingdom, the one who is responsible for Dakar's death, kidnaps your newborn baby. And now it's not a matter of morals anymore. It's a matter of how quickly I can cut your head off. So you go to the little tower Indra has retreated to. You cut his freaking head off. And as you're holding your rescued child in your arms again, Iris shows up for the first time in a year again, and is basically like, did you think this wasn't going to happen? You didn't defeat the Sinistrals. You defeated Gades. He is but one of the 4 Sinistrals. As long as the other ones remain, they will recapitulate the one of them that is lost. Gades is coming back. He's really none too pleased with the fact that you were able to humiliate and defeat him in battle. Maxim realizes that his hero's journey is not over. Even once he finally decides he wants the white picket fence with the little dog life, he isn't going to get it. And so as he goes back to continue his journey again, you meet Dr. Lexus, who is also mentioned in Lufia 1, because again, this is originally one single story. Dr. Lexus's lab in Lufia 1 even looks the same as it does in Lufia 2. Dr. Lexus, cool character, uses wrenches, hits all enemies with a standard regular melee attack. Again, emphasizing that this game is awesome. It understands you. You have a boat now. It's time to start fighting enemies in the sea. There's going to be tons of them. This character's auto attacks hit all enemies. Have fun level grinding. You're going to level grind. You might as well have fun doing it. By the end of the game, you start to end up with a familiar party of Maxim, Guy, who has rejoined you, Salon, and the last character, the blue-haired elf, Artia, who is sometimes called Artie, because there's sometimes 2 translators. Sometimes there's a translator who does the in-game text and dialogue, and there's another who does the menus, items, monster abilities, and characters' names in menus, which is separate from the translator who does the in-game dialogue. And sometimes he is called Artie, like the strongest man in the world from Pete and Pete on Nickelodeon. And sometimes he's called Artia, an actual elf's name. Artie, as I'm going to call him, the strongest man in the world. He's fundamentally, statistically stronger than Dakar because he's able to equip bows, which their auto attack hits all enemies. Artie can also equip swords, but you really probably want to leave him on bows when you're doing anything but fighting a boss. Because why wouldn't you want to auto attack every enemy for 200 damage as opposed to hitting one for 280? Also, Artie, as an elf, is able to cast the 2 light-based attack magics in the game, Fry and Holy, which are they're just strong, and they look cool. The magic spell effects in this game for a Super Nintendo game, I think they're mad dope. They may not be as detailed and impressive on a pixel level as, say, Final Fantasy VI, but I love the fact that most of them cover the entire screen. And also, a little side note about magic is that you can individually cast it on one enemy, or let's say you got 4 enemies, right? And 3 of them are weak to fire, but 1 of them isn't. When you're selecting who to cast magic on, you can press the L or R buttons and individually sub-target, I only want to cast on these enemies. That also works in your favor for healing magic, because if you cast healing magic on 4 of your characters, it divides the healing potency amongst 4 characters. You can choose to just say, I only want to cast this healing spell on these 2 characters, and you split the heal in half as opposed to dividing it into a quarter across all party members, because maybe not every party member needs to be healed. You can do this with offensive as well with healing magic and with buff magic. You can just say, I only want to buff my frontline fighters. Why do I want to give attack bonuses to my mages in the back line? This game is just a masterwork in every regard. I'm so drunk. So when you get to the end of this game, it starts to become glaringly obvious that Iris is Aram. Obviously, if you watch the intro, Iris is Aram, the Sinistral of Death, the blue-haired Aram. And when you're going across those 3 turret towers at the island you see in the intro of the game, that's when you're getting the legendary hero's helmet and the legendary hero's shield and the legendary hero's breastplate. And along the way, you fight Ammon and Daus, and then you fight Aram, and it's like, wait, I don't get it. If you're the Sinistral of Death, why have you been guiding me on this journey this entire time? What are you doing? And it becomes glaringly obvious that Aram herself doesn't even know. She's still trying to figure that out. And then you will finally recognize, as you go toward the end of the game and fly your Zeppelin airship into Doom Island, as it's called in America. It's Estpolis, the Fortress of Doom, whatever. That the beginning of Lufia 1, you play as this party, and I started to realize, oh no, I've already seen what happens at the end of this game. I already know what happens. No, you don't. At the end of the prologue in Lufia 1, you see Maxim, Guy, Salon, and Artie fight against the 4 Sinistrals. And at the end of it, Salon is knocked away, and as the Doom Island is collapsing and falling back into the bottom of the ocean, Maxim and Salon are too far away from the escape spell. And Maxim just says, go. Leave us. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters anymore. And you see Guy and Artia escape, and that's all you see in Lufia 1. And then 100 years pass, and then that game begins. But in Lufia 2, you see what actually happens. In the, oh, we defeated the big bad, and there was an anime explosion, and we all got knocked all over the room. Guy and RT walk over toward Maximus, and it becomes quite obvious that Salon wasn't just knocked around by an anime explosion. She was knocked into a pillar and cracked her skull open. She's bleeding to death. She's got maybe a minute left when Guy and Artia escape out. That's it. Then Iris shows up. She basically just mocks and derides Maxim and asks, was it all worth it? Maxim abandons his dying wife, face and hands and arms covered in her blood, and asks Iris, how do I stop this island? Dao said he's making it fall into Parcelite. They already just took my wife from me. I can't let them take my child from me as well. Please tell me how to stop this. And Iris says, I am the goddess of death. It is against my very nature to tell you anything that would save people's lives rather than end them. And Maxim calls her a liar. And tells her that's not true at all. Because right now you've appeared before me, not as Aram, the goddess of death. You're in front of me as Iris right now. Are you even aware of that? The Iris I know has always told me what to do next. She has always told me how to save people's lives. And right now you are in front of me as Iris, not the goddess of death, Aram. Tell me how to stop it. And at this point, the song For the Savior, which you better go listen to, sometimes called For the Savior of Those on Earth, begins to play. Iris creates a teleport pad on the ground as her body begins to fade from being visible. She says, if you take this teleporter, it'll take you under the island. Break the 3 stones you find. They are what are keeping the island afloat. If you destroy them, it'll fall straight into the ocean. And then she vanishes. You don't see her again. So Maxim has to abandon his wife. She lies dying on the ground, running through that horrible labyrinth at the bottom of this palace of death, seeing the clouds and the stratosphere rapidly encroaching as he destroys the first, second crystal. But when he gets to the third, his magical, mythological sword, the dual blade, refuses. So Maxim pleads with the sentient sword, the dual blade. DUAL, as in more than one. he basically sacrifices his life force the way Descartes did for the better good. He is destroyed alongside the crystal, and the dual blade made his decision. It allowed him to destroy that last crystal only because he was willing to say that my life is not worth the lives of so many others. If I must die so that many may live, this is what I choose. And then Solon's spirit appears next to the crystal. As Maxim's body begins to dematerialize, he walks out to her as they stand amongst the clouds, as they turn into orbs of blue and white light, and just say to each other, "Let's go see our son." And as the game concludes, you see these two orbs of red and blue. This is around the time the song "To the Future" begins to play. And it's not your typical JRPG ending where everyone is happy and everything's great. It is the two despairing souls wandering around the world, trying to make sure that their loved ones are still doing okay, and finally ending above their 1-year-old child as she is cradled by her grandma. And you can tell that the innocent child is the only one able to see its parents' souls hovering above it. And in that conclusion, Maxim and Solon are satisfied and are able to pass on and are able to rest. And then I decided to play Lufia 1 and see the end of the story. Lufia, when she gets kidnapped, she's made aware that she is the Sinistrel of Death, and that's why she leaves your party. But your protagonist, who's nameless as far as I'm aware, you can name him whatever you want, he's just the descendant of Maxim 100 years later. He refuses to believe that that sweet young girl who used to make him cinnamon tea when they were children could be something so insidious. He has seen something inside of her that nobody else has seen. And when you get to the end of Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, right as the Sinistrals are about to combine into their ultimate, truly indestructible form, Aram hesitates. She doesn't know if she is Lufia, Iris, or Aram anymore. She doesn't know who she is or what she wants to be anymore. And so she's broken out of the abominable fusion of the Sinistrals, which is, by the way, one of the hardest freaking JRPG bosses of all time. It is just brutal and savage. How much HP and how much damage that thing deals out and has. What the crap. It's also one of the coolest looking sprites in the Super Nintendo, by the way. You should see it. But in the end of it, by defeating the Sinistrals, Lufia cannot exist anymore. And as she lies dying on that same bridge that Maxim once held Solon on, as she died in the same place 100 years prior inside Estpolis, Her body falls down the collapsing glass bridge as he escapes with his companions, unlike Maxim. Distraught and broken, he just wanders the world for a couple of years. Yeah, I may be some great hero that everyone praises, but don't have the person I loved the most by my side anymore. So it doesn't matter. And after the end of his multi-year sojourn, he returns to his hometown, the place where he once met a young girl with blue hair named Lufia. He muses to himself that now is the season when the Prefia flowers used to bloom. Lufia loved them so much. I wonder if they're blooming right now. And as he goes to find them, he sees a girl with blue hair. And he asks her, "What's your name? Who are you?" She just says, "My name is Lufia. What's your name?" Because in the end, even though it took 100 years, Aram's decision was that humans should rule and not the Sinistrals, because she instead chose to be Lufia, a simple, magicless human girl who could just spend her days being a human, experiencing every emotion that a human can, because she decided that that was superior to being an eternal goddess of death. By the way, there's a whole roguelike and like 100 floor dungeon in this game. It's like a whole mini game on the side. It's kind of dope. There's an entire speed running community devoted to the ancient cave and speed running it. Yeah, that's also in the game. After you beat the game, you unlock New Game Plus, where you get 4x EXP and gold from all enemies. And if you beat that too, you unlock Retry mode, where it is literally just the ancient cave, and you can select your party members however you see fit without being limited by what story flag you're on. Seriously, Lufia is one of the most amazing stories I have ever seen and experienced in my life. I first saw this, I don't know how many years ago, when I was like 14, 15, 16 years old or something, and here I am, 39 years old, simply recounting in vague sort of detail what this game is about, and it's still making me cry. So, yeah. There's really very few things that are as much worth your time as playing through the story of Estpolis, also known as the Lufia games. They're some of the finest experiences I have ever had in my life. And I hope that you'll give them a shot and see why I love them so much as well. Thank you for your time. Appreciate y'all. And God bless.